All right, we're going to take a look at the Week 13 games last night. Monday Night Football. Just so many emotions, up and down. And first of all, let's talk about the big injury here. Trevor Lawrence, the ankle injury. So, did they not have a golf cart anywhere? No carts? Nothing? Like a unicycle? Anything with a wheel that could have gotten him to the doctor's room?
Yeah, I go visit my buddy's grandparents in Little Gasparilla, Florida, and all they do is have golf carts. That's how everybody gets around
There's so
everywhere.
many golf courts here in Florida. So many.
That's what I thought. There's golf courses, there's retirees. It was it was bizarre to see him like still in his cleat, just hobbling down this long concrete tunnel. But that's the big injury, of course. And I've seen speculation that that's going to be like both ankle and a knee. Like he got his ankle rolled up, then he got completely bent backwards. So again, we got to take it with a grain of salt, what these guys on Twitter who haven't actually looked at the patient are saying, but we're hearing high ankle sprain, we're hearing MCL. If it's either of those things, we're looking at potentially no Trevor Lawrence for the remainder of the fantasy season. And then we've also got Christian Kirk going down with his injury that was
Little injury? What
highly,
do we want to call that one?
I don't know, highly speculated about, but I think the formal PG term is a groin injury, but hopefully he can ice up and make it back out next week. But who knows? I mean, if this offense, if they don't have Trevor Lawrence and they don't have Christian Kirk, we're looking at huge knocks for Calvin Ridley, Travis Etienne, Evan Ingram. I mean, this would be detrimental to the Jacksonville Jaguars as a whole.
So I'm looking at this right now for Trevor Lawrence. My NFL Network's Mike Garafolo saying there's optimism that Trevor Lawrence's injury and ankle sprain, as Tom Pelissero first reported last night, isn't bad, and that's a credit to the Jaguars' quarterback's flexibility. Not the first time he's been rolled and avoided serious injury.
I mean, we
So
talked about
okay,
this. Like these
maybe a
guys
little
should be
optimism.
doing yoga and ballet and doing whatever they can to make sure they're flexible so they can get rolled up like that. Like, so good on Trevor Lawrence for taking care of his body because I mean, he got twisted up like a pretzel. I'd be shocked if he doesn't miss at least 1 week. I mean, even if it's a low ankle sprain, a low grade ankle sprain, he might be able to go out there and play, but he's not going to have the same mobility. I mean, we'll see. It's early. We're speculating the morning after this injury happened, so we're going to wait for some more news to come out. But I think one of the biggest takeaways from this game, we've talked about the injuries here. I think one of the biggest takeaways is that Jake Browning is
Jake
pretty
Browning.
good. Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, yeah, that's all I got to say. I mean, I've seen the wild takes out there that Joe Burrow's a system quarterback and
I
that
was
he is
gonna
just
say, I
a
was gonna say
product.
that was in
Yeah.
the group chat last night with a couple of my friends. Joe
Mhm.
Burrow, system quarterback now. Jake
I'm not going to go that
Browning.
far. I think Joe Burrow is
No.
very good, but Jake Browning. He surprised me. And really, if you could just get the ball in Jamar Chase's hands, I think that's going to make any quarterback better. And like we saw Jamar Chase, it wasn't a perfectly thrown ball, but he put the ball out to Jamar Chase to let him make a play, and that's exactly what Jamar Chase did. Joe Mixon also looked good enough where they had the run game, which kept the defense honest and allowed him to take some shots deep, but it's kind of this not so great position for Bengals fans because I think their playoff hopes and the thoughts of a deep playoff run are out of the picture. They're hoping for a better draft pick, and I think Jake Browning is going to continue winning some games down the stretch here.
Yeah, I mean, Jake Browning looked great. 32 of 37, 354 yards and a touchdown. I think the big story here, like we're talking about the injuries and the individual performances, it's that the Bengals won. And they
Mhm.
were heavy underdogs in this game. Jamar Chase still out there getting targets, and this is kind of what we have been talking about: is that you have to consider Jamar Chase in the same light that you do Dante Adams and Garrett Wilson. I'd probably just say maybe a step up because he's a more talented player, but we see 11 receptions on 12 targets, 149 yards and a touchdown. These blow up games now seem very, very possible. So if you were one of those people that maybe got to cash in on a Jamar Chase and buy low when everyone was freaking out, hey, good on you. Good on you. I don't know that we're going to be able to see Jake Browning support multiple receivers and a
But
very
Jamar
high
Chase is
powered
alive.
offense, but yeah, Jamar Chase is still alive here. Dave, the other thing I want to look at from this game is uh, Travis Etienne. What is happening here? What is happening? I know that so much of his production earlier on in the season was based on touchdowns, but he's just not even getting the usage that we normally like to see either. 11 carries, 45 yards, and a touchdown here. Even when it seemed like the game was close, the Jaguars just didn't really seem like they wanted to run the football a whole bunch.
Yeah, and Dearness Johnson is carving out a bigger role as well. But I think really what it comes down to is maybe we got a little bit, as you like to say, we had the touchdown goggles. He had 6 touchdowns in 3 weeks, was looking like a smash top three RB1, and then the touchdowns since have dried up. Just a classic case of regression hitting. So I think you're still looking at ETN as a top 12 option, and he always does have that upside where he could stumble into the end zone a few times, but probably not the top three, top five guy we were hoping he'd turn into this year.
Next game on the docket here. Green Bay Packers beat the Kansas City Chiefs 27-19. This is another quarterback that we're talking about that's looking a lot better than we had thought. Jordan Love. He's out here winning games. He's the reason that the Packers are winning games. They're doing this without Aaron Jones, and it looks like they're going to have to do it for a little bit without Christian Watson as well, Dave.
Yeah, and we liked Jordan Love in the preseason and felt very much so like we nailed that call through the first few weeks. And then all of a sudden he dried up and he didn't look so good. And now these last 4 or 5 games, he's looked spectacular. I mean, I think he's got like a 12-2 interception ratio over the last 4 games he's played. What's surprising to me, though, is that he's able to get the ball into just about everybody's hands. Like we're seeing guys that I wasn't even familiar with, Malik Heath out here making plays and Tucker Kraft coming to life. And Jaden Reed, we knew he was a good player, but I think he surprised a lot of people as well. So, you know, kind of joked about it in the preseason. We said, maybe the Packers did it again. They kind of slow rolled it with Brett Favre, turned him into a Hall of Fame quarterback. They slow rolled it with Aaron Rodgers, turned him into a Hall of Fame quarterback. I'm not going to sit here and say that Jordan Love is a Hall of Fame quarterback, but I think he's done enough this year that he's probably going to get a nice contract at the end of this offseason. And we're probably looking at Jordan Love as the Packers starter for the foreseeable future.
On the other side of the ball, this has been a really weird stretch of games here for Patrick Mahomes. Let me read you his fantasy finishes
Mhm.
since week 8 here. Quarterback 30, quarterback 12, quarterback 15, quarterback 8, quarterback 16. He has got one finish inside the top 10. I d- Dave, are we getting to the point here where I know it's a short span, right? But are we getting to a point where maybe you don't trust Patrick Mahomes as an every week
Ugh.
starter, given how bad the surroundings are? He's still Patrick Mahomes, right? And you feel like you have to start him. But this is always an interesting conversation because at what point do you just start to say, this isn't the same dude that we thought he might have been? Like we've had to see this with a few other players, whether it be Adam Thielen or whomever, but we've seen this where it's just like, how much proof do we need that a guy's not producing until we say, I'd rather go elsewhere?
Yeah, and I think Patrick Mahomes is still Patrick Mahomes. Like you
Of
said,
course.
the surrounding talent is the issue, and right now he's got a career low touchdown rate this season. He's got a career high interception rate, and unfortunately, when you've got a guy like Patrick Mahomes who doesn't have that, he scrambles. Don't get me wrong, like he's got some legs and he can make plays with his legs, but he doesn't have the same rushing upside that gives that floor to guys like Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields. So you kind of do get these lows. And in the past, we've seen him throw for 41 touchdowns and 50 touchdowns in a year. But now with that touchdown rate taking a dip a little bit, he's kind of like a Joe Burrow or maybe a Justin Herbert where he's got a dangerous weekly floor. And the other thing is Travis Kelsey, he still makes some plays here and there, but Travis Kelsey is not the guy that he has been in years past. I was thinking, just kind of brainstorming yesterday, having a little thought exercise here. Like, is Travis Kelsey even a top 24 pick next year? It's not that he's regressed dramatically. Like, it's not like Travis Kelsey is just killing you in your lineup every single week. But now with the emergence of guys like Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid and Trey McBride, and then next year we got Brock Bowers coming into the league. Cole Kmet's
He
been
just doesn't
balling out.
separate as much from the pack as he's done in years past.
And that's it.
That's what
He
it
might
is.
he might give you a slight edge, but even if he is, finishing the year, I mean, even Taysom Hill is outscoring him over the second half of the season this year. Like he's not giving you that 7, 8, 9 point advantage that he was giving you over every other tight end. So I think, he might still be the tight end one this year. He might still be the tight end one next year, but I think his reign is being that huge positional advantage is kind of coming to an end here.
And then on the Packers side, we know that we have the injury to Christian Watson. We talked about this a little bit with Romeo Dobbs being a guy to pick up. Uh, Dave, does this mean that now Romeo Dobbs and Jaden Reed become kind of every week starts from here on out, the way Jordan Love is playing, and with no Christian Watson, no Luke Musgrave, no Aaron Jones? Are we kind of just saying, hey, if you have a Packers receiver, you probably need to start them?
Yeah, I think Dobbs and Reed both have a very high weekly ceiling, and I think it's just that. I mean, Jordan Love, I hate to make the comparison, but there's a lot of guys out there, a lot of quarterbacks that really like to spread the ball out. Patrick Mahomes does it. We've seen Sam Howell doing it this year. So he doesn't really have that guy that he is going to lean on consistently. So you're looking at a pretty shaky floor with any Packers receiver. We even saw with Christian Watson having the shaky floor, but still having the high ceiling. So I think given the potential upside that any of these guys can have, 150-yard, 2-touchdown game, you got to start Dubs and you've got to start Jaden Reed. But just know that there's going to be some lows there because Love really does have a penchant for spreading the ball out.
Our next game here, Los Angeles Rams beat the Cleveland Browns 36-19. And this is the first time we've really seen an offense and a quarterback and a running back and receivers all get theirs going up against the Cleveland Browns. It's the first time we've really seen this defense look human. And that's not at all what I was expecting with this game because the Rams have not been consistent. Matthew Stafford has not shown that he can really go a game without throwing an interception. And then, of course, he does that here against the Cleveland Browns, who have been consistently getting turnovers. Dave, I don't know what to make of this situation here in Los Angeles, especially with the wide receivers, because we see that Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp both actually had decent games. Cooper Kupp was kind of saved by a late touchdown,
Yeah.
but Puka Nacua seems to really be the primary guy in this offense. 7 targets, 4 receptions, 105 yards, and that's with him leaving for a little bit due to injury. He still finishes the day with a touchdown, over 26 fantasy points in PPR. I think that we're seeing, and I hate to keep using this because we did this a lot too in the waiver wire show, talking about some other younger guys taking over for older players, but I do think we're seeing a changing of the guard here where Puka Nacua is becoming that main target for Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp is sort of drifting to the back.
Yeah, and Cooper Kupp, like you said, had that late touchdown, and thank goodness he did, because if not, we're looking at a 5-catch, 35-yard game, and he got it was wide open on that touchdown late in the game. But man, Cooper Kupp really, I think we're looking at him for the rest of the season. This is a guy who had been the per game wide receiver one in back-to-back years in both 2021 and 2022. Really high hopes for him, of course, this year. I was buying the injury dip all offseason. I don't know if these injuries are just piling up or if it's his age getting to him, but is it crazy to say that Cooper Kupp is just kind of a wide receiver 3?
No, I mean, it's not. It's not crazy. We were talking about last week that he's a guy you can actually consider dropping. This is that weird part of the season where you can't really hold out hope for guys to get better or for guys
Mhm.
to put it together at some point later. You have to essentially win every single game. And so, we've got guys in the YouTube comments asking, should I drop Adam Thielen for XYZ receiver? And most of the time the
Maybe.
answer is yeah, you kind of need to at this point. Ramondre Stevenson was a guy that we talked about before who his ankle injury appears to be worse than expected and could miss 3 to 4 weeks, which is basically the season. So
Yep.
we're looking at a point here where I think with Cooper Kupp, I don't know that you can trust him in your lineup unless you're looking at a 3 wide receiver league. Maybe you don't have enough other players. You need someone to be a flex. You got him stacked with Matthew Stafford. There's circumstances here where you can always start him, but it's weird to say that with a guy that's been so good for so long.
Right. And I don't want to breathe any life into the Cooper Kupp retirement rumors. It seems like those are
No,
pretty, there's no real sources coming out saying that. But let's just say next year, for the sake of discussion, Cooper Kupp comes back and plays again. Puka Nacua is still there, of course. And let's say Matthew Stafford comes back as well. Where are we drafting Puka Nacua? Like, is he a top 10, top 12 guy? Are we drafting him in round 2? Because I think at this point, we are almost through the entire regular season. And outside of a few injuries, like Puka Nacua has been absolutely dominant. Like, he is just continuing to do it week after week. At a certain point, we got to just throw draft capital out the window and say this guy can play. Are we looking at him as kind of a middle, late second round pick next year in fantasy drafts?
I think that you could be looking at him as a top 12, top 15 wide receiver. I want
And
to
he's a
pull
wide
up
receiver
where that
9 on the league or on the season so far this
yeah,
year. Wide
okay.
receiver 9 in PPR.
I'm actually curious. I want to see this based on ADP where that player went. So if we're looking at like around wide receiver 12, that was back end. That was the turn of round 2 to round 3. So you're basically saying that you need to go and draft next year. If you're looking at Puka Nacua, you'd probably end up having to draft him early round 3, mid round 3. That's where
This
we were
year's
drafting
Keenan
guys like
Allen,
T.
Calvin
Higgins.
Ridley.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, that's where we were drafting guys like Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf. I think that's kind of I think you're right there. I think that's where Puka Nacua ends up being, especially in PPR formats. And yeah, I'm a little worried about Cooper Kupp here. Last thing in this game, we see Joe Flacco comes in, looks decent. It's still kind of crazy that the Jets did not immediately sign Joe
Ugh.
Flacco after knowing that he knows the system and going through what they're going through. But he comes in. We see a big performance here for Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore, who's a guy that we talked about a little bit on the waiver wire episode yesterday. I know that a lot of his production was somewhat dependent on Amari Cooper being
Yeah.
out of the game with a concussion. So, I mean, we can kind of mix that in here. But Elijah Moore, 12 targets on the day here, only 4 receptions, so the quality was not that great. But 83 yards, Dave, is Elijah Moore a guy that not only, I mean, I know we're going to go pick him up, but is he a guy that you're going to be comfortable starting again next week if Amari Cooper's out?
Yeah, because there was a different usage too. We saw him getting targeted deeper downfield, where earlier in the season he was getting a lot of gimmicky touches, screens, and sweeps and things like that. But I just want to shout out Joe Flacco and Elijah Moore because in SFB this week I had Justin Fields, DJ Moore, and Saquon Barkley all on bye, and the Joe Flacco Elijah Moore stack got me into round 3 of the playoffs. So thank you, Joe Flacco.
Welcome to week 14. The Joe Flacco Elijah Moore stack is winning games. All right, let's go to our next game here. San Francisco 49ers beat the
Woo!
Philadelphia Eagles, man, and beat is putting it nicely. The Niners really, this was a statement game for them. The
Yeah.
statement game to win 42-19 over the team that, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the Eagles are still number 1 in the NFC. They still have that
Mhm.
number 1 seed. By the way, I just want to say my Miami Dolphins also number 1 seed in the AFC. It's the first time I've seen this in my life. We'll get to that later. I just really wanted to say that out loud. But Dave, Brock Purdy is now the front runner for NFL MVP. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it because it seems like it's going to be a little bit of a divisive topic here. But should Brock Purdy actually be the MVP of the NFL this season? I mean, 314 yards, 4
Yeah.
touchdowns. It's very narrative-y, and we always know this is kind of how it goes. Quarterbacks that are winning games for a while, and it's whoever has the best final 6 games of the season essentially gets MVP. Brock Purdy looks like he's doing that.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And a lot of people are discounting this game because he didn't have a lot of throws deep downfield. But with the defense that the Eagles were playing, they wanted to take away those deep throws. So what did he
Yep.
do? He took the underneath throws and let his playmakers do what they do. We saw Debo Samuel ripping off big plays. We saw George Kittle ripping off big plays. But if you look a couple of weeks ago when he was playing against the Dallas Cowboys, he was hitting those throws deep downfield. Like Brock Purdy really can do it all. He takes what's given to him, and when it's not given to him, he's able to make plays. He can extend plays out of the structure. I think he's a really good quarterback. I don't think I have no qualms with him winning MVP or being that MVP front runner right now. But this is something I said last week and the week before and the week before all season leading up through week 10. Every single week there was somebody injured, one of these playmakers. It was either Christian McCaffrey dealing with an oblique injury, or Debo Samuel missing time with a shoulder injury, or George Kittle banged up, or Brandon Ayuk banged up. This is 3 straight weeks now that we have seen every skill player healthy in San Francisco, and when this team is at full health, they are unstoppable. As we've seen over the last 3 weeks, I don't think there's a better team in football. What they do on the defense, what they do on special teams, and then when that offense is healthy and humming,
Yeah.
they should be the Super Bowl favorites.
Yeah. I don't think there's anyone else that really compares right now. This was incredible, by the way. Debo Samuel, great game, incredibly efficient, 7 touches, over 130 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, and he's doing it everywhere. It's just 4 catches on 4 targets for 116 yards. And then he's on the ground running, what is it, 3 carries, 22 yards, averaging over 7 yards per carry on this. He had a nice long run of 14 yards there. It's just, as long as he's healthy and he's practicing
Yeah.
full, that's the rule, right? You
Mhm.
start Deebo Samuel, and they're continuing to find creative ways to use him. Brock Purdy's playing at a level here where I don't think we have to be as worried about which 49ers player is going to score. I think we can just say they're all probably going to score because this offense is good. And if they don't score, they're going to at least give you a good floor in terms of fantasy here.
Yeah, and
Uh,
we're also seeing on the other side of the ball Devontae Smith coming back to life, and this is something that we
yep.
had hoped for
Yep.
almost identical to last season's script. Like they are just reusing the same script on Devontae Smith as last year. Gets off to a slow start. Dallas Goedert gets hurt, and then all of a sudden he turns on the Jets late in the season. So good to see for people that were concerned about Devontae Smith's early season. He's looked good over the last few weeks. I mean, 96 yards and a touchdown this week, 106 yards and a touchdown last week, 99 yards the week before. So this is 3 straight games that he has strung together where he's put up really solid production. And you and I were talking about Devontae Smith as a buy low player right before the trade deadline here. And, the fear is that Dallas Goedert comes back at some point, and that could hinder Devontae Smith's fantasy production. But right now, he's playing like the high end wide receiver 2 you drafted him to be.
DeAndre Swift. I know that we can't go out and make trades or anything like that, but if you have DeAndre Swift on your team, how comfortable, like, what's your panic level right here, scale of 1 to 10? Because there's been so many weeks where everything has been good and you've been able to start him with confidence. He's a solid high end RB2 with upside and a good offense. And then lately, it has not been as reassuring, especially in this game where he ends up with just 6 carries for 13 yards. The usage just wasn't there, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, the 49ers are a buzzsaw. We know that. Like what they do to running backs, they just absolutely crush these guys. Any running back going up against San Francisco is touchdown dependent. Like if they don't fall into the end zone, they're not going to have a good game. And that's just what happened here. I mean, the usage wasn't terrible. Like he still saw 6 targets. He just happened to turn that into 2 catches and 7 yards here. So Kenneth Gainwell, was just fared a little bit better in the passing game. And I think that's what we might see is Kenneth Gainwell is good as a pass blocker. He can also do things out in space. So I think in these trailing game scripts, we're going to see a little bit more Kenneth Gainwell. The good news is this is the Philadelphia Eagles we're talking about, and they aren't going to
Yeah.
be in a lot of game scripts where they're trailing. So I'm not panicking. This was a tough matchup. I don't think anybody expected them to get blown out by 4 scores here. So I think you're still starting DeAndre Swift with confidence going forward.
I'm in full agreement with you there. Taking a look at the Football Guys strength of schedule tool that we have over on the
Mhm.
website, the Philadelphia Eagles running backs are at fourth easiest remaining schedule. And especially where it kicks in is the fantasy playoffs, where they've got the Seattle Seahawks, the New York Giants, and the Arizona Cardinals all in the bottom 5 against fantasy running backs right now. So DeAndre Swift, I know that it's been tough sledding and you're maybe a little bit worried right now, but keep that confidence with him. He's a guy that you can continue to start each week.
Yep.
Now, next game on here, Tampa Bay Buccaneers defeat the Carolina Panthers 21-18. And we can't call this the pillow fight of the week because there was definitely a game that was way worse. Mike Evans is still really good at football, Dave. He just continues to be really good at
Got a
football.
1,000 yards, man. Love to see
It's
it.
it's his tenth straight 1,000-yard season.
I think if you go back to college too, which I mean is kind of silly to do, but at this point, but he did it every year he was in college too. Like I saw somebody went back like his senior year of high school, every year in college, he's had like 14 straight years of a
Yeah.
thousand consecutive or 1,000+ yards. Just absolutely bonkers what he's done.
This is totally not fantasy related. It's a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but I had one of my friends ask this the other day. Who has the better career in your eyes? Mike Evans or Julio Jones?
I knew you were going to say either Julio Jones or Calvin Johnson, one of those guys that had like an insane peak and retired early. I mean, really, it's just a conversation of longevity. And I think what we've seen, at least from like Hall of Fame voters, is that they do really value longevity. These guys who can do it for extended periods of time. So at this point, I expect Mike Evans to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. As soon as he is able to get into the Hall of Fame, I expect to see his bust out there.
Yeah. Now, in this game, the Carolina Panthers, we just like there's nothing good left there, man. Even in a game where you're thinking, okay, there's going to be a lot of passing. Both these teams have bad defenses. Uh, Bryce Young goes out and gives you 15 for 31, 178 yards, no touchdowns, an interception, sacked 4 times. I just don't think that you can trust any of these Carolina Panthers skill players. I know we got a big game from Chuba Hubbard,
Chuba,
but
yeah.
I mean, are you going to go and start Chuba Hubbard next week as a guy that you can count on as an RB2 or a flex play? Are we in that area with him now?
Nah, I mean maybe as like a flex if you're desperate. There's some guys on bye this week, but it's been really tough because this game heavily favored Juba, and we've seen a handful of games that have heavily favored Juba, but then we've also seen games where it's a 50-50 split and neither guy is doing much of anything at all. A lot of people were hoping when Deuce Staley was let go, Deuce Staley was the guy, if you remember, kept Miles Sanders on a short leash in Philadelphia. And then we were hoping that with Deuce Staley gone, same guy who kept DeAndre Swift on a short leash in Detroit. And we were hoping that maybe we'd see Miles Sanders' role expand a little bit. I don't know. Like I've never been I hate to say this, but I've never been a huge fan of Miles Sanders' talent. He's got the home run upside, but he really struggles with a lot of other things as a running back. But with the amount of money that they gave him this year, I was hoping that maybe they'd try to force some usage his way. But we're just not seeing it. He's been terribly inefficient when he gets the ball. But like I said, we've seen the usage scales kind of tip in both directions. So I don't know if you feel confident starting Chuba Hubbard, but like gun to my head, I got to pick one of these guys. I
No,
guess I'm
no
going to
guns.
lean towards Hubbard over Sanders.
I don't like violence, Dave. We're gonna avoid that. Let's just not do that. Rachaad White, however, on the other side of this, he just remains a volume machine. 20 carries in this game, and then taking a look, if he another 3 receptions on 5 targets. So you're looking at a guy that's leaving this game with 25 opportunities in a matchup where, I mean, I know it was a close game, but the Bucs were really in control the entire time, and Rachaad White just continues to get fed the ball. Rachaad White, is he just going to be a set it and forget it? I can't believe I'm saying this. RB1 for the rest of the season because of the volume. He's like consistently in the top 13, top 12 every single week.
I'd take it a step further and say that he's a top 5 guy. Like it's Christian McCaffrey, Kyron Williams, Rachaad White. Those guys have just been consistent for the entire second half of the season. And our judgment of Rachaad White might be clouded by the early season usage where he was getting a ton of carries and he was inefficient. But much like Kyron Williams, gets in a rhythm late in the year and has become a more efficient runner. We're seeing that with Rachaad White as well. So he's got all of the passing down work. He's got all of the goal line work, and he's becoming a better rusher. I don't know why we wouldn't look at him as a top 5 guy for the rest of the season.
How many top 5 running backs are there, Dave?
5.
You sure about that?
Let's go through. I mean, right now, Christian McCaffrey, Kyron Williams, Rachaad White. Who would you prefer over those guys realistically?
I honestly, I can't even think of the names off the top of my head here. When I heard you say that, my brain immediately went to shades of David Montgomery as a top 5 running back, to Breece Hall as a top 5 running back. And now I think you've cursed Rachaad White. I think you might have put the curse on Rachaad White.
I mean, Montgomery's still doing it. He still keeps finding his way into the end zone, still keeps scoring
Top 5?
points. Yeah,
Top 5?
I'm okay with it. I think Montgomery is probably top 8, top 10. I'm still comfortable keeping him there. He and Jahmyr Gibbs continue to
It's
keep
funny.
scoring.
I'm saying all this, and right now Rachaad White is the running back 5 on the season. So
Yeah.
I guess that's where
I
we
think
are
maybe
as a
maybe the
society.
one other guy I'd throw up there in that conversation is like the elite
Throw
running
up,
backs to
keyword.
have for the rest of the season. Alvin Kamara, Raheem Mostert. I mean, really, who else would you prefer ahead of Rachaad White?
So I mean, so we got Christian McCaffrey,
Yeah.
right? Alvin Kamara, like you said, Raheem Mostert probably, Kyron Williams,
Yeah.
I think is top 5 as well. Yeesh. Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It makes sense. I can't believe this just happened on the show, but it makes
Yeah.
sense.
I mean, like I could hear some people out there saying maybe Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry or Joe Mixon or Jonathan Taylor or whoever else, but with the way Rachaad White's been playing, the volume he's getting, his role as a pass
That's the
catcher,
thing.
lockdown on the goal line work, why wouldn't you want Rachaad White for the rest of the season?
That's the thing, is that this Bucks offense is just good enough where they can actually score points,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not so good where they can afford to take Rachaad White out of the game plan
Yep.
altogether and just let Baker throw the ball.
Yeah.
There's going to be those check downs. There's going to be the running. Wow. Look at where we are. Look at us. I can't believe this just happened. Next game on here, Miami Dolphins beat the Washington Commanders in another just shellacking here from week 13. Miami Dolphins 45, Commanders 15. This game was done so early that Tua Tagovailoa and a bunch of the other starters just went to the sideline. I believe it was like mid third quarter.
Mm-hmm.
It was absolutely nuts to see. And by the way, Tua was 4 yards away from hitting his prop. So, and depending on where you were, it was actually just 1 yard away. So depending
Vegas
on like
always
what,
knows.
oh my gosh, so annoying. But Dave, the conversation I want to have here, man, is Tyreek Hill. Why could he not be considered the MVP? I mean,
He
stupid question because I know he's not a quarterback, but oh my god, we're not seeing anyone do what he's doing. He's on pace to break the receiving record and doing it whilst running less routes than Calvin Johnson did when he broke it. So I mean, I,
He's a part-time
we're
player. He plays like 60% of the snaps and
really,
goes for like 180 yards a week. It's unbelievable.
it's so unprecedented what he's doing right now. And I mean, there's the Dolphins are on a roll offensively. They keep losing players on defense, which just breaks my heart because they keep just losing players. But Tua Tagovailoa, we see another very efficient game from him. 18 of 24, 280 yards, 2 touchdowns, 141 quarterback rating. It's great. Sam Howell kind of turning into a pumpkin here. I don't know if it was just the matchup against Miami, but this was a strange one because this was tied for his lowest amount of pass attempts in the season, just
Mm.
23 here this week. And this is a guy that normally we see
Oh,
him throw the ball a
yeah.
lot more. He
And
still he
Brian
still
Robinson
ran
got
well.
hurt too, which is weird. You'd think
Yeah.
in a game where Brian Robinson gets knocked out, they would lean on the pass a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't quite know what happened here. Maybe Commanders are worse than we think. Maybe Dolphins defense is better than we think. But it was definitely a weird one. But for Miami, Devon Achane is back and running, and I know he led the team in carries. A lot of that has to do with them being up early and Raheem Mostert coming off the field and getting a lot of those Mike White snaps.
Which I gotta
But
say is weird for a guy who I don't want to label him injury prone, but a guy who has been nicked up a bit this season. It's weird to
yeah,
just lean on him in a game that's over. Like that should be Jeff Wilson time. That should be Savon Ahmed time. It's really weird to see him giving Achan all these touches late in a game that's already blown out.
I guess the way you can put it is, like he kind of needs a safe environment to return back to game form.
Yeah.
It's a little different than practice, so I guess getting him those reps was what they were trying to do. But he looks back. He looks
Yeah.
back, 17 carries, 73 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then he was able to contribute in the receiving game as well. 3 catches, 30 yards there. So I think that the Miami Dolphins backfield is back to being scary, just like it was before.
And
That offense, terrifying.
I think the Dolphins are going to continue winning games down the stretch here, but are you concerned at all about Tua? He's been a top 5, top 8 quarterback for the majority of the fantasy season, but what we've seen is that when he gets a pass rush in his face, he struggles a little bit. And if you look at this remaining schedule, man, you got to be somewhat scared if you are a Tua Tagovailoa manager going into the playoffs. Titans, Jets, Cowboys, Ravens, those are all teams that generate a strong pass rush. Do you think that there could be any concern for guys who are relying on Tua to win a championship?
So, one, I mean, I wouldn't be wanting to rely on Tua to win a championship right now because of that matchup against Baltimore in Week 17,
Mhm,
Dallas in Week 16, the Jets in
mhm.
Week 15.
That's what
It's
I'm
just
saying. It's a
it
rough
it's it's
schedule.
it's not even like a matter of if he's good enough or if the pass rush is going to be good enough. Like those are just tough defenses for fantasy quarterbacks in general. And if you're not getting that rushing upside from Tua, I would not want to be leaning on him. I think the hope here is if you're stuck with Tua, is that this Dolphins offense is just going to be good enough where they're going to get some
Mhm,
of those like little Devon Achane flips underneath where he's going to be able to take a ball to the house. And that's kind of what you're hoping for here. I think the good news is with how good this offense is, you kind of have a solid floor with Tua. But
mhm.
I don't know that you're going to be getting that top 3,
Yep,
top 5 upside that you were hoping for and getting earlier on in the season.
and that's exactly it, yeah.
Now, for the Commanders, last thing I want to look at here, Brian Robinson with the hamstring injury. These are not injuries that go away quickly.
Right.
So we talk about this. The Commanders have a bye here in week 14, back in week 15. Antonio Gibson, question mark. Chris Rodriguez, also a guy who does stuff here for the Commanders in the backfield. I mean, he was better on a yards per carry basis, and Chris Rodriguez does do a lot of what Brian Robinson does as well. They both even have Junior at the end of their name.
Yeah, I'd prefer Antonio Gibson ever so
Right.
slightly this weekend, but I am concerned that Chris Rodriguez takes on a much bigger role than people anticipate. I'd be okay benching both of these guys this weekend, kind of seeing what the usage looks like,
Well,
and then
this
hoping.
weekend for sure because they're on a bye.
Yeah, of course. So that makes it even
Next
tougher
weekend.
because then we're looking at first round of playoffs, wanting to see how this usage shakes out, and then you got to be comfortable enough to plug one of these guys in the semifinal. So this is just kind of a disaster overall, I guess, when you're looking at how this backfield could work out. Because Brian Robinson, a lot of it has just been the fact that he has been healthy, but he's been an RB1 this season, which I don't think anybody really expected.
So let's do this scenario here. It's week 15, first round of the playoffs for you. Commanders versus the Rams. Antonio Gibson is the starting running back for the Commanders. There's no Brian Robinson.
Ugh.
You're looking at maybe a potential shootout back and forth here with 2 bad secondaries and 2 quarterbacks that love to throw. Are you willing to roll the dice on Antonio Gibson as, let's call him a flex play that week?
I mean, if I have Brian Robinson and I have Ramondre Stevenson and I had Nick Chubb and every other running back that's gone down and I'm really desperate, yeah, I'd probably plug Antonio Gibson in, but wouldn't feel too great about it.
Next game on here, Chargers beat the Patriots 6-0. That happened. Moving on. Next game after that. Dude, it's just so bad, man.
Real
How does
quickly,
this
I just
even
gotta ask, my wife asked me today, and I couldn't believe I had to
Yeah,
answer this question. She goes, "Should I drop Trevor Lawrence?" She goes, "Baker Mayfield is available on," or I'm sorry, not Trevor Lawrence. She goes, "Should I drop
Justin
Justin
Herbert?
Herbert? Baker Mayfield is available on waivers." And I didn't know how to answer it. I don't think that Justin Herbert is a bad quarterback, but he has no weapons outside of Keenan Allen. I mean, this is just it's bad. Like Justin
Yeah,
Herbert has had a rough stretch of games here.
I don't want to be too reactionary. Looking at it right now, I mean, Herbert was quarterback 2 in week 10, quarterback 3 in week 11. Then he faced a really tough Baltimore team where he was quarterback 15 and then goes up against New England. And a big part of what he's been doing is even without the weapons, he's been running the football pretty well. He's been
Mhm.
getting those rushing touchdowns. He's been, I mean, looking back, 47 rushing yards, 73 rushing yards, at least 15 or 17. Like there's games here where he's running the ball well. The problem is against the Patriots, they just tend to slow the game down so much. They
Mhm.
take away whoever your best weapon is, and that's kind of what they ended up doing here. The fact that it was a 6-0 game is just ugly.
Ugh.
And Justin Herbert, for the first time, ends up with negative rushing yards. We haven't seen that this season. So as much as I would like to say there's probably better options out there, I think you can probably throw this game away because he's got some good matchups coming up: Denver, Las Vegas, Buffalo, and then Denver again. So I think you can continue to trust Justin Herbert as a starting quarterback going forward, Dave.
That's what I told her, but, I hope I'm right.
Maybe she'll listen to
I don't
me.
wanna I don't
Wives
wanna
never
sleep on
listen
the
to their
couch.
husbands.
I don't wanna sleep on the couch next Sunday, so hopefully Justin Herbert could turn it around.
Yeah, hopefully. The other thing that is noteworthy here for the Patriots, somewhat noteworthy, is the Ramondre Steven injury. We talked about how this is something where you might be comfortable having to drop him from your team if he's going to
Mhm.
be missing 3 to 4 weeks, just because of how much is left in fantasy season. Ezekiel Elliott. Now, with the amount of touches that he got, it was 22 opportunities in this game, 17 carries, 52 yards. It wasn't pretty, but it was kind of effective for fantasy. He's probably going to give you double digit fantasy points each week, probably not getting near the end zone, but he will get the touches. So, are you comfortable starting Ezekiel Elliott going forward?
Yeah. I mean, who else is going to touch the ball? Somebody's gonna have to. It's not gonna be pretty, but, Zeke is probably gonna see 20 plus touches, and that alone is enough for, flex RB3 consideration.
Yeah, I hate the matchups coming up. He's got Pittsburgh and then Kansas City.
Mhm.
And then I guess it gets a little bit better towards the end of the season, Denver and Buffalo. So sure, he's fine. He's fine. Like I wish we had stronger takes on this, but
Yeah.
it's Zeke. It's a bad offense. It's not great. Next game here, Houston Texans defeat the Denver Broncos 22-17. CJ Stroud continues to be phenomenal. Nico Collins personally victimized me this weekend in
Mm.
fantasy football. Thanks, Jake Seeley, for that one. He also had DK Metcalf. Like it was over before it
Oh,
started.
yeah,
Oh
that's
yeah,
brutal.
it was just awful, awful. The big news out of this, we talked about this on a previous show. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen, go back and check out the waiver wire show that we did yesterday. Tank Dell done for the season. It's a heartbreaking,
Heartbreaking.
Dave.
Yeah.
But from this, who do we expect to be the next guy up? Because as of right now, it looks like it's going to be Noah Brown being the next guy up, who went out and ran the most routes and had the most wide receiver snaps of any player on this team, despite not producing at the Nico Collins level that we saw.
Yeah, I mean, CJ Stroud's another guy that spreads the ball out. He'll throw it to just about anybody. So Noah Brown is probably the immediate guy that you want to pick up. But I think we see more of Brevin Jordan. We're going to see Dalton
Yep.
Schultz's role grow. I'm not too enamored. Like, I don't think you should go out and pick up John Mechie, Robert Woods. I think they're kind of a mirage. I wouldn't trust either of those guys. But if you're in a deep league and you're getting desperate, I think Brevin Jordan is a guy that you can look at.
So interestingly enough, this next week they go up against the New York Jets. I'll be curious to see what we see
Sauce could
from
lock down
Sauce.
Nico, and then we see a
That's
big
the
blow up game from Noah Brown. Yeah.
That's the thing. We could see something like that. We could also see a little bit of the tight ends here are working pretty well. And we saw Damian Pierce start to get a bit more action in this backfield. I don't think you can trust either of those running backs going forward. It's going to be a little bit of a split. It's going to be a little ugly. On the Broncos side of this,
We just keep saying like Cortland Sutton can't keep scoring a touchdown every week, and he just keeps scoring a touchdown every single week. It's kind of hilarious.
And it's in like the most ridiculous ways too. 2 catches for a touchdown. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a great play, don't get me wrong, but I mean, he can't keep getting away with this, Dave.
But he does, and I mean, that's what Courtland Sutton has always done. We saw it early in his career where he just makes these spectacular circus catches, and that's why I like Courtland Sutton so much going into last year. I said his abilities as, to track deep balls and make these acrobatic catches are going to pair up perfectly with what Russell Wilson does, throwing these deep moon balls, and we didn't see a lot of that last year, but now we're seeing it this year, and, Courtland Sutton, it's you don't feel confident starting him every single week. The usage hasn't been there, the catch volume hasn't been there, but he somehow just keeps scoring on huge plays, making huge plays, scoring touchdowns, and just hovering in that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 fantasy range.
I will say this, I don't really trust the Broncos receivers a whole bunch. However, I do kinda trust and like their upcoming schedule.
Mhm.
They've got the Los Angeles Chargers, Detroit Lions, New England Patriots, and then the Chargers again. So, I don't know that I would be starting Jerry Jeudy anywhere, but
Yeah.
Courtland Sutton kind of remains on that wide receiver 2-3 fringe every single week, and I'm happy to start him, especially if he's got this touchdown upside.
Yep.
All right, next game we've got here, Detroit Lions beat the New Orleans Saints 33-28. Taysom Hill, what's up, man? I started him at tight end. Worked
Yeah.
out pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, not bad. Is he? He's just going to be a must start tight end kind of every week here, especially with the Michael Thomas injuries, the Rashid Shaheed injuries, and it just seems like he's just going to continue to be used around the goal line.
What do you mean he's going to be? He has been. I mean, he's been a
I'm saying
must-start tight end for the
like
second
he's
half of the
going
season.
fair, fair. I'm also saying going forward, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of crazy. We saw a big change in usage in week 6 is when we saw Juwan Johnson wasn't playing and we saw Taysom Hill's usage ramp up a little bit. And it's crazy right now. Since week 6, he's averaging 14.3 points. That's just as many as Sam Laporta. And Travis Kelce and TJ Hawkinson are the only guys averaging more than him. If you go back to week 8, when we saw him with his first big boom game of the season, he is, get ready for this, the tight end 3 since week 8. TJ Hawkinson and George Kittle are outscoring him. He has more points than Sam Laporta, more points than Travis Kelce. Like it's crazy what he's doing right now. Yeah, he is a must start. I've been ranking him as a top 5 tight end because the ceiling every single week is so high. There might be a few guys out there that are maybe, a little bit safer, but his ceiling is so high every week that you just got to keep starting him.
yeah. You mentioned Taysom Hill there. However, on the season, we got to talk about Sam Laporta here because this is, I mean, just phenomenal. I know that so throughout the preseason, a lot of what was being touted was go and get the best tight end possible, go and spend on a guy like Travis Kelce, go and spend on these elite quarterbacks like a Joe Burrow, a Trevor Lawrence, these guys who could take the next step and be top 3. And it seems like we're right back into the situation of you can find tight end streamers like Jake Ferguson and Trey McBride and
Mhm.
Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid. And you can find these late round quarterbacks that are performing well. And we're seeing that all over the league. Brock Purdy, 14th round pick, CJ Stroud, undrafted. I, I mean, are we just kind of seeing a new wave of tight end here where we kind of alluded to this earlier. It's not Travis Kelce or bust because Sam Laporta is the number 3 tight end on the season.
Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, we've seen a huge influx of new talent at the tight end and quarterback position, and we're going to see even more next year when Caleb Williams comes in and Drake May comes in and Brock Bowers comes in. So I think late round tight end, late round QB, back on the menu.
Back on the menu, boys. Week 13 game recap going on right now. We're taking a look at the Atlanta Falcons, New York Jets. Well, I guess this was like the secondary pillow fight of the week,
Yeah.
13-8. The only
It
thing
was
I
a
really want
game.
to
It was a
it
football
happened.
game.
It did take place. It did take place. Tim Boyle got benched for Trevor Simeon. The Jets now want Zach Wilson to go back in, and reports are that Zach Wilson's like, nah, I'm good. He doesn't. I don't know what to believe there, but that's the reports that are floating around. Dave, is there
That
like
did
why
get
would?
squashed a couple
Uh,
of hours later,
okay,
where
okay, that he does want to play.
Robert Saleh said that he does want to play, but I mean, we keep saying a lot of the same stuff, and we feel like it's just kind of Groundhog's Day talking about the same thing over and over again. But Breece Hall leading the team in targets, didn't do a ton with it this week, unfortunately, but 8 targets for a running back is obscene usage. Yeah, this is just Unfortunately, he only turned it into, I mean, 13 carries for 16 yards. Ugh. Six
It's
catches for
just
29 yards. Ugh. This offense is just so stinking bad.
it's the offense is bad. I mean, we do have to put some of this on the actual players themselves. I mean, when Dalvin Cook is actually running better than Breece Hall right now, there it feels like there's a mental block because Breece Hall is not a bad player like this. He's not. There's some sort of mental block where and you see this sometimes with running backs where they lose so much confidence in their offensive line that they do exactly what Robert Saleh is saying. They try to hit home runs every single time instead of just actually get 2 or 3, 4 yards, whatever they can up the middle. And I know that the Jets, when you go and look at the numbers, they have some of the worst yards, or excuse me, lowest yards before contact here because they keep getting hit behind the line of scrimmage. I'm sick looking at this Jets offense right now. It's
Yeah,
terrible.
it's bad.
Uh,
I mean,
uh,
crazy to
uh,
say, but like at this point, I'm maybe kind of hopeful for Zach Wilson to come back. Tim Boyle was so bad and just completely killed Garrett Wilson's value that like go Zach Wilson.
I think Robert Sala is done. I think Robert Sala is done after this
Been
season.
saying that for weeks. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but just the way it is. You are your
Uh,
record.
at, At least the positive thing to come out of this game, Bijan Robinson got himself plenty of touches, 5 targets on this game. He also finished with 18 carries. It didn't turn into a whole lot of fantasy points, Dave, but that's got to be encouraging going forward. Arthur Smith isn't messing with our head anymore.
I suppose.
I
I mean,
suppose.
turn it into what, like 76 total yards? Like, still nothing to write home about. It was just a bad game. Two terrible offenses, two surprisingly good defenses, and it just made for a disgusting game where, well, let's see, in PPR leagues, we had Desmond Ritter, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, and Xavier Gibson were the only guys to eclipse double digit points, and not one of them scored more than 12.8. I mean, this was just an absolute dumpster fire for fantasy.
I'll say this though, the usage is certainly encouraging for Bijan Robinson. I mean,
Yeah.
you're looking at 22 carries, 16 carries, 18 carries, and looking at the targets, if you're getting 4 targets, 2, 6, 5, like the opportunities are there for Bijan, like they weren't there early in the
Right.
season. So at least that's something. That's
Yeah,
something that
he's
we can be a little excited about.
trending up in that aspect, yeah, but again, it's a lot like Breece Hall, where it's a really talented player on just such a bad offense that you gotta ride the highs with the lows. He's gonna have some boom games, and he's gonna have some games like he did this week where, the opportunity's there, but he's still only giving you 11 PPR points.
I think it's a bit better. I think it's a bit better with Bijan. Like he's at least he's giving you touchdown upside. He's giving you better yardage on the ground. I think it's a bit better. It's a bit better. But I mean, we're splitting hairs at that point. Next game on here, Colts defeat the Titans 31-28 in what was actually one of the better games this week. And it's
Great game.
the first time I've ever seen a quarterback go and chase down his own fumble and get it back from a defender. Phenomenal. Will Levis just chasing the rebound down. But on the Colts side of things, Zach Moss disappoints a little bit, doesn't give us exactly what we were hoping for in
Mhm.
place of Jonathan Taylor. 19 carries, though. He
Yeah,
got the work. It's just 51 yards, no touchdowns. And just we didn't see him get used as much in the receiving game as we'd like. Just 2 catches there for 6 yards. But Michael Pittman remains the guy on this Colts offense. 11 catches, 16 targets, 105 yards. I I guess at this point it's kind of doesn't really matter too much. But I mean, Michael Pittman, how did we miss on him going into the season, man?
I don't know if we missed on him. I drafted a ton of Michael Pittman, but I think one of the big things was the concern with Anthony Richardson. That
Right.
Anthony Richardson was supposed to be the quarterback, and rookies don't support elite quarterbacks. I think if we knew Gardner Minshew was going to be the starter, we probably would have had Michael Pittman a few spots higher. But that's the big thing that's changed here. I mean, Michael Pittman was still putting up some production when Anthony Richardson was playing. You look early in the season. I mean, week one with Anthony Richardson, he scored 24 PPR points, but he also had some down games. Against the Rams, he only put up 4.5. It was when Minshew came in that he really kind of turned on the Jets and started putting up elite production here. But that's kind of what we were hopeful with Gardner Minshew, is that he at this point in his career is a veteran, and we know veterans can support multiple weapons. And Alec Pierce going for 100 yards. Josh Downs had a quiet game, but we've seen some boom games from Josh Downs, even while Michael Pittman is getting his. So, yeah, I think at this point we're looking at Pittman as kind of a high end receiver two going forward.
So on the other side of this, Tennessee Titans, we talked about the big injury with Derrick Henry, where initially it was reported that he was placed into concussion protocol by Adam
Mhm.
Schefter, and then dueling reporters, Ian Rappaport comes out and says Titans coach Mike Vrabel clarifies that running back Derrick Henry is not in the concussion protocol. That puts him on track to play this week. They've got Monday night against Miami. I'm, I don't, I mean, I guess you're starting Derrick Henry no matter what, right? Like it's
Yeah.
still it's one of these games where it could be a shootout against Miami. Um, but are you comfortable with Tajay Spears now? Are you going to maybe back down a little bit on some of that waiver wire fab, or are you still getting him as the insurance policy?
Yeah, I think, you still, even if Derrick Henry is healthy this week, you still draft him for the contingent upside because we know he's going to get like 100% of the touches if Derrick Henry needs to miss. But I don't know if there's a lot of allure in starting Tajay Spears if Derrick Henry is healthy. This isn't like a hamstring injury or something like that where he's going to be limited. If he doesn't have a concussion and he's cleared to play, he's going to get his normal workload. If you're starting Tajay Spears, you're hoping he could rip off a big play or score a touchdown, which we've seen a little bit here and there this season, but the usage with a healthy Derrick Henry is so low that you can't really count on him. So, assuming Derrick Henry plays, which it seems like he is going to now, you're starting Derrick Henry, you're benching Tajay Spears, but still go up and pick Tajay Spears because if Derrick Henry does miss, I'm not sure there's a more valuable handcuff in fantasy football.
Final game we're going to take a look at here, the Thursday night football game. Cowboys beat Seahawks 41-35, and a game that it surpassed all of our expectations, scored way
No
more points
punts.
than what was. Yeah, oh
How
my
cool was
gosh,
that?
really?
No
What? That
punts
is
in the
awesome.
every drive ended in either a score or a turnover. How cool is that?
That is football. This is cinema.
It was like
Put
the
that meme
7th
up
or
right
8th
there.
time in NFL history that's happened.
That is absolutely awesome. And you never see that on a Thursday night game. We saw Dak Prescott continues to just look fantastic. 29-41, 299 yards, 3 touchdowns. He got sacked plenty here, 4 times, but I mean, Dave, this is a conversation that I think that we can have here. I know that Brock Purdy right now is the favorite for MVP. If I had to pick, I'd probably pick Tyreek. But if it comes down to like who the quarterback would have to be, I actually think Dak Prescott might be more deserving of it over Brock Purdy. I think he's doing more with less, or about the same with less.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's it. But I think the 49ers might be a better story. I don't know. It was
Yeah,
splitting
that's what
hairs,
it
but
is.
Dak has really, really surprised a lot of people this year. He was a guy that I was admittedly a little bit lower on this season. And I
Same.
found myself drafting a lot of him in best ball because I really
Mhm.
liked CD Lamb. And then I was just like, well, why not? I'll stack him with Dak Prescott. But as far as like redraft rankings, I wasn't pounding the table for Dak. I thought that we saw his best years are already behind him. He had that QB1 season a few years ago. Then he had the ankle injury, and he hasn't done a lot since. But man, he's looking phenomenal this year. Like I can't give Dak his flowers enough. He has looked great this year.
Tony Pollard, 3 straight touchdowns in 3 straight games, finishes this game
There we
with
go.
20 carries. So he's starting to get a little bit more of that volume. We're starting to see his usage in the passing game, 4 targets again. So we're looking at 4 targets, 6 targets, 5 targets. He's getting his work. And
Rico
next
Dowdle is an
week,
afterthought, like he should be.
this next week up against Philly is going to be a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
So I expect maybe a little less on the ground for Pollard. But hey, you know what? Actually, Philly's been beatable against running
Mhm.
backs over the last couple of weeks. It has not been the same Eagles defense. So we'll see what happens there. On the Seahawks side of things, Zach Charbonnet struggles a little bit on the ground here, but he still gets you 19 carries, 60 yards, a touchdown. It's solid from his end. The one that we really talked about, the guy who is really outperforming, is Jaxon Smith-Njigba, who led the
Mhm.
team in targets, led the team in receptions. He didn't have the crazy blow up game that DK Metcalf had with 3 touchdowns, which feels like that's just been due for so long. But Jaxon Smith-Njigba, it's wild to think that he's not on every single roster.
Yeah, and we talked about that yesterday on the Waiver Wire show. If you haven't checked that out, be sure to do that. Yeah, Jackson Smith-Njigba, can't say enough good things about him. Slow ramp up with a preseason injury, but he has really come on the last few weeks, and I think I don't know. I'm thinking right here, and I might say something stupid, but would you prefer
Do
JSN
it.
over Tyler Lockett for the rest of the season?
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
not that
his
stupid. I think
upside is
that's
there.
very reasonable at this point.
Yeah, we're seeing Tyler Lockett, still a steady player, and I think he's a great chain mover. But 8 targets last week, 5 targets the week before, 7 targets the week before that. Well, JSN is trending up right now. I mean, we saw his first really heavy usage in this game with 11 targets, but Pete Carroll has really, really been singing his praises. And then also, we're kind of looking ahead, talking about, I'm going to pose kind of the same question that I did with the Miami Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa, their schedule coming up here. Man, Charbonnet has done enough that he's not going to disappear. I think that he and Kenneth Walker are very different players. Kenneth Walker has that home run upside that Charbonnet doesn't have, but Charbonnet is much better at turning nothing into something. When he gets hit behind the line, he's still going to pick up 3-4 yards, and that's something that Kenneth Walker doesn't do quite as well. So I think we're going to see a little bit more of a split going forward. So if we're looking at touches being split in this backfield going up against these next few weeks, the 49ers, the Eagles, the Titans, the Steelers, what are we supposed to do? Because if Kenneth Walker comes back, I think we're just going to be looking at split touches against really tough defenses. That's concerning.
I think it will be split. You're right. I think it's going to be one of those infamous 60-40 splits that we see everywhere. I don't think that in these cases you're starting Zach Charbonnet because he's always going to be on that lower end and you're hoping he falls in the end zone. I think that what you do is you end up starting Kenneth Walker as a low end RB2 because of the breakaway ability, because of those home run big plays. And that's kind of where you're stuck with him. I don't think
Yeah.
that you can go into a week and sit Kenneth Walker based on the matchup. You're going to have to play him, Dave.
Right.
You
And
mentioned
that's the
that
thing.
schedule, how
Early in
it's
the
tough.
season, we
Mhm.
like we had the one week where I ranked him as the running back one overall. Like he was putting up top 5 production, and that's just a tough pill to swallow for anyone who drafted Walker. It felt like he drafted a top 5, top 10 running back, and like you said, I think we're looking at him as more of kind of a back end RB2 now down the stretch here because of Charbonnet's emergence and because of the really, really tough schedule.
Well, there you have it. Those are our week 13 takeaways. Dave and I are going to be back later on in the week, giving you our starts and sleepers for week 14. Guys, we are 1 week away from the fantasy football playoffs. Hopefully, we've been able to help you out and get you there. We'll see you guys all next time. We'll be back on Thursday. Adios.